Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for May 20th, 2024. I am Jer Stays, and joining me across the table is none other than
Fletcher Sharp.
Good to see you at the studio in Tech Town.
Yeah, likewise. It's a nice day out, so why not come outside and do stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can see out the windows here. It is absolutely gorgeous here in Detroit's Midtown. And I got to tell you, summer feels like it is already here. And these couple pieces of news that we're going to talk about make me think of summer, honestly, Fletcher, because there is the news that the old Belle Isle Zoo that's been long shuttered. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources confirms that the state plans to demolish more than 20 structures and restored the area to natural habitat. Reports say that new nature trails and passive recreation amenities will replace the old zoo footprint. The demo process is expected to start next year, and it will cost a little over $1 million. The zoo first opened in 1895 because back then that was outside of the city limits. It closed in 2002. I have a lot of memories of it as a kid. We're going to talk about it in a minute. They had a ton of animals there. It was the place to go. You know, when I was younger, we didn't go to Royal Oak. We went to the Belle Isle Zoo. The public really wanted to keep this zoo. They voted in favor of it right around the 2000s, but money just ran out. There were various plans to revive it. There was even this idea by former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick to turn it into a zipline park. None of that came to fruition. It's kind of now a magnet for visiting like abandoned stuff and things. But man, I have a lot of memories. Do you remember the zoo?
Yeah, I used to go as a kid. I went a few times. It was the first time I'd ever seen a gorilla in person. It's the first time I found out that pandas were actually like animals and not like just fictional cartoon characters of like a black bear and a polar bear mushed together. I knew they had flamingos at one point. I remember those. Never got a chance to see them, but I knew they were there. And like, it's almost like the Mandela effect. Like when you talk about the zoo, people are like, "What? Like you mean the one in like Royal Oak?" And they're like, "No, like the one on Belle Isle." They're like, "There's not a zoo on Belle Isle." In fact, I was there this weekend for a softball game, and one of my teammates who is from the state, but he's from up north and moved down a little bit ago, was like, I wanted to ask, what are those like buildings next to the field? Like that's all, enclosure and graffiti. And I'm like, that's the zoo. And he's like, the zoo. And I'm like, yeah, where they have animals like that, the Detroit Zoo is Belle Isle Zoo. And he's like, what do you mean? Like Detroit Zoo's in Royal Oak. And I was like, no, like literally there was a zoo on Belle Isle. Like there was a zoo here with animals and it was amazing. And they closed it down. I don't know how it slipped my mind when they closed it. But I remember coming in like 2018, I had a date and I was like, we're going to go to the Belle Isle Zoo. And she's like, there's a zoo in Belle Isle. And I was like, heck yeah. And we got there and it was just graffitied structure. And she's like, this is the zoo. And I had no words where I was like, it's been closed for a minute, obviously. And she's like, you want to go to the one in Royal Oak? I'm like, no, I want to go home. This has been a very emotionally trying day for me to find out the zoo that I went to as a kid has been shuttered for so long. No, I'm glad it wasn't a zipline park because I don't know what Kwame was thinking, but I'm sure that could be said for a lot of things.
I mean, I remember the zoo. If you didn't know, even if you've never had the chance to go, because it has been closed a while, it's been closed longer than some of our listeners have been around. It was interesting in that you walked on these overhead decks over everything else. And there were some things you interacted with, but it was very much kind of looking down on things. It felt like something straight out of a movie. It was real crazy how it was put together, but very relaxing. It was definitely a smaller zoo, but for someone like me who grew up on the east side, we didn't have a car growing up. So I took the Jefferson over the Belle Isle bus, and that was the zoo that I could go to. That was the zoo that I remember taking pictures in front of. I don't think I visited the Royal Oak Zoo, the zoo in Royal Oak, which is the Detroit Zoo, which technically is on land the city of Detroit owns. Long story. But I had not been to that zoo until I was in high school, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I had not been to that zoo until like similar around the same time. But just you said it felt like out of a movie. It really did. Like I'm not gonna go the length of like Jurassic Park, but it felt kind of like you were in the forest. Like obviously like you're on Belle Isle in Detroit, but it felt like you were in some different type of just atmosphere where like yes you are in a city with buildings and cars and people and coffee places, but like it felt like there's a small part of it that was just kind of like the swamp area in Belle Isle where like you go there and like yes you can be very much aware you're directly between Detroit and Windsor, but it felt just like its own little thing that was different. And while like the Detroit Zoo in Royal Oak is great, it feels like you are like in a zoo. Like it feels like there's no point in time you lose yourself and like, ooh, this feels like a little extra, nestled foresty area. It's like, no, this is a zoo structure, etc. And the Belle Isle one for me just felt like you were in a movie, like you were in a movie scene. Like you go in there and like you walk in some of these structures, you go to some of the enclosures, you can get a little, not super close where you can touch people, but like it felt like you were getting kind of in there nestled in, as opposed to like it's very obvious there's a barrier to like you don't get to cross this and do things there. So
Okay, Fletcher, really quick. Do you remember the movie Real Steel?
I do.
Did you know that was shot in part at the Belle Isle Zoo?
I remember the scene exactly. I did not realize it was a Belle Isle Zoo until you informed me of that. And then when you showed me the scene, I was like, duh. Like this literally we just talked about like how the zoo was built and how structurally it looked and how you could see the enclosures where the animals would be and like where it's kind of like parts where you would step up. And instead in the movie, it's, where two very big Rock'em Sock'em robots are fighting. And I bet you if that had happened in real life, the zoo would have never closed.
And I hope with some of the video, if you're listening to the show, check out the video version. I've actually included some pictures and things of what it used to be, because I think if you didn't get a chance to go to it live, it's really hard to explain what a special place it was. I'm glad to see it, be habitat and all those different things, but I do shed a tear for it. Now, some news about what is opening or reopening. The famous Giant Slide is set to reopen this summer. Last year, it made national news for busting tailbones and heads. I mean, I don't know if literally, but tailbones for sure. I hurt my tailbone on that slide back in the day. Apparently, there are new safety improvements. Apparently, they're adding padding and other stuff to help people from hitting the slide rails, like side to side, and also kind of your landing area. There's a ton of fond memories that I have that are always reinforced by that pain. Like how a memory hits you and you feel the pain even though the pain isn't there. That is what I feel about the Giant Slide. If you've been part of Detroit at all, of a certain age, you at least have tried it once. They also removed the wax because that didn't seem like a great idea. That's part of why this thing ended up on Jimmy Kimmel. They say that more than 30,000 people have recently enjoyed the slide without injury. There is not a reopening date, but they say it will be sometime this summer. Fletcher Sharp.
They have not put the padding on the sides yet. I've went by the slide, and every time I go by there when it's not open yet, I'm like, man, that thing used to be kind of fun as a kid. Like, obviously, as a kid, when you kind of get hurt, you bounce back. And it's like, oh, I broke my hand. And then next week, you're like, I'm out doing the same stuff again and you just regrow. But, like, as you get older, your body's like, hey, that last little bump you had, you're going to feel it for a while. So I will be watching people enjoy the slide. I'll be partaking in the enjoyment of all the happiness there, but no, I am not going to risk going down that slide, even with no wax, even with all the precautions, because I still have a memory of going down that slide and it being very fun to the last bump, and then you hit it and it's like, oof, now my back hurts, and like all the joy of going on the slide, screaming happy, like wee, is all replaced by that very big like oof, and I don't think I could survive that oof in this current advanced age of mine.
All right. So no team slide together, like Norris, Devin, Cheyenne, Randy, all of us down at once on the slide. You're a no?
I will definitely take a selfie with you guys in the background to get a team photo there. I don't no, unless my health insurance improves real quick. Like I'm good. I'm happy for the people who are going to enjoy it, because especially like I think it's one of those kind of like the Belle Isle Zoo to a degree. It's one of those indelible marks of like, yeah, you definitely are a Detroiter now. Like there are people who've moved here who are like, I've been here for so long, I'm part of Detroit. It's like, go down the slide once. Go on the slide, get baptized by iron. You're a Detroiter then. There you go. When you do that happen and you get down there and you're like, ooh, that's what people are talking about. All right, you're good. Now you're one of us.
You heard it here first on Daily Detroit. The official baptism of being a Detroiter is the Giant Slide.
And not even just a Giant Slide, but like definitely hitting that last bump and being like, that was not as fun as I thought. Like it's fun for 90% of it. And that last little extra bump is like, this is unnecessary. I know why they did this. It's so that people who are like, this is easy, this is a breeze, don't think it's a breeze anymore. And if you go through that slide and the bottom last little hip and you don't feel anything at all, then like, hey, you are in the wrong profession. You should be a professional athlete. Because like I don't know how you don't feel that at all. But I'm glad it's coming back because it definitely will help drive people to Belle Isle because people will definitely want to go down that slide for sure and at least see people do it.
All right, let's take a minute and pay a bill really quick. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by your Metro Detroit Best Choice Roofing. Whether it's time to replace your roof, repair it, inspect it, or get your gutter cleaned, Best Choice Roofing provides top-notch roofing services tailored to meet the unique needs of Detroit homes and businesses. They serve the region and inside the city of Detroit too. And let me tell you, as somebody who lives in a 100-plus-year-old home in Detroit, finding contractors is its own challenge. Find out more at bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com. That's bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com or call 313-474-7031. That's 313-474-7031. And we thank them for their support.
Might have to write that number down because I need some roofing stuff done sometime soon too.
All right. Now, Fletcher, we wanted to talk about this for a minute. Other stories got in the way. And then I saw something in Axios Detroit today, and it jogged my memory that we wanted to do this. So let's use this as a news peg. The WNBA is becoming quite the thing, and I'm feeling a little bit on the sidelines because we do not have the Detroit Shock anymore. And I know you remember the Shock, and I remember the Shock.
I feel kind of like a Seattle Supersonics fan right now where it's like the NBA is really popping off, and it's like, yeah, our team is in Oklahoma. And we could say the same thing to a degree because our team literally left Detroit to go to Oklahoma before they then relocated to Dallas, and they're currently the Dallas Wings. I'm happy the NBA is exploding. I remember when the Shock were here and, like, they would, like, give away tickets to a degree at, like, Great Lakes Crossing. Like, my first Shock game I went to, I was walking with my stepfather and my mother at Great Lakes Crossing. Like, you want to go watch a basketball game? And I was like, yeah, and I thought it was a Pistons ticket. They're like, here you go, and it's a Shock. And I was like, what is this? And they're like, WNBA. And I was like, what is that? They're like, women's basketball. And I was like, okay. And I went, and it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had. They weren't good then, but it was, like, still fun to go there and, like, see, like, Deanna Nolan, who is from the state, an amazing basketball player, an amazing athlete. I think at 5'9", she could dunk a basketball, which is insane. Means you have like a 40-inch vert, which is just unheard of. And then they started to get good, and then they got to be WNBA champions, and they won it 3 times. And just, I was like, I'm in love with this team. And obviously, like, the championships definitely helped, but it just felt like a team that was like Detroit. It felt like a Detroit team through and through. And not just because of Bill Davidson making sure to get old Pistons greats and Bill Lambier and Rick Mahorn to be on the coaching staff. But this team just felt like our team. So when the team moved to Tulsa, I was beside myself, and I couldn't really even verbalize how I felt. I mean, I've never painted my chest for a sporting event except for 3 Detroit Shock games. So like that lets you know how invested I was in that team.
Yeah. I mean, look, women's sports didn't have the same prevalence that it does now at all. You're even seeing it with soccer and some other things. But I think now would be the time, although I am kind of sad to see that we're not really on the short list for expansion. I know that Golden State is getting a team, and it's officially going to be announced later this week that Toronto's getting a team. They don't have a name yet. So things have changed. And here's the other thing. That WNBA has a lot of talent in it because there are so few teams. I think one thing that overexpansion has done, in my opinion, is kind of diluted things out a little bit. Like with the WNBA, because there are so few teams, there are so few slots, and you're getting the top of the top of the top on that court for sure.
And people don't seem to realize that. I know when Caitlin Clark was about to finish her career and be drafted, people are like, she's going to come in the WBA and she's going to run things. And a lot of the older players were like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And people were like, they just seem like haters. And it's like, no, the difference is the league has X amount of teams. There are players who are 2-time All-Americans who don't have a home in the WNBA because there's so few teams, and they have to compete against like Brianna Stewart, who literally won the NCAA championship 4 years in a row, was a player of the year 3 of those years. Yeah, you have players like that who are currently there. Or you have some of the best players from Australia and Japan and Brazil, and they're all coming here to play. So, like, while you might have had a great college career, because there are so few teams, you might just not have a shot for a while. And that just has to be okay for now. It's kind of like late round NFL draft picks where it's like you might have had a great career and you get drafted, maybe you don't fit with your team. Maybe you have to go play in Russia for a year, or go play in Korea or Japan or Taiwan for a year, then come back and then try again. And it's not because you're not talented enough. Again, you might have the long list of accolades, but again, you have to hope that like someone moves off of a team or a new team opens up to give you some more roster space. And I didn't realize that until a few years ago, where just there were some players who had some major accolades that I was like, why are they not in the WNBA? And I'm like, oh, it's not their talent. It's just because like at their position for the team they were on, they have like 3 former 2-time All-Americans. Like, yeah, you're not. And then 1 like WNBA great. Like, you're just not going to play, and it has to be all right. And, you know, hopefully some expansion happens a bit more than just what's happening now, so they can get some of these really talented players to teams so people can see all the talent the WNBA can have.
Look, money talks. That's just the reality of modern sports. And I think if the money came up, there'd be a way to do it. At the end of the day, if the money came up, there'd be a way to do it. And you've got LCA. If you were worried about attendance, which I don't think you should be, right? There's the Wayne State facility, which I think seats 3,000 that the G League team plays in, just down the street from here. I mean, there are options, and I've learned it's about the money. Like, if there's the will, there's the way. And I'd like to think that Detroit will come out and support women's sports like that. I would like to think that.
I mean, for a lot of things, I would say maybe attendance, if you could have an actual real reason to be worried. The Detroit Shock were beloved. Like, they didn't fill up the Palace like when the Pistons were there, but like the Palace was at least halfway full, and the Palace was a very big facility. So to fill it halfway for a WNBA game where like not all the seats are available, that means something. I think if they brought them to LCA and they were able to take a team, build a team and put them in there, I think they would do pretty well in attendance. I'm not going to sit here and say like they'll be the best attended team in the league, but I know people are hungry for the Shock to come back.
I think they beat the Pistons right now.
That's not really saying much. I think the local DCFL games that happen on Tuesday nights probably beat the Pistons attendance.
Yeah. I want to hear what you think. DailyDetroit@gmail.com, 313-789-3211. Do you want to bring back the Shock or another women's team here into Detroit? I think it would be a great thing for the city. Let's talk about it. Or do you have memories of Belle Isle like I do, or things you wish that you saw? Share them. I'd love to hear those stories, or even share stuff that I remember. You know, my time frame is kind of like the 80s to the 90s. Yours is a little bit later because I think you're like 10 years younger than me.
90s to like just early 2000s.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear what you think. DailyDetroit@gmail.com. And by the way, thank you for all the notes. I spent hours last night responding to emails about stuff with the Detroit City FC stadium possibility and some other things. I really appreciate your in-depth thoughts. It really shows that there's a lot of care in this community for this. And I love that back and forth conversation because, you know, it ends up being a lot more nuanced and we all start learning a lot more than when it's a shout fest on social media, you know?
And honestly, the whole point of like dialogue is to learn something. Like, it's to get a point across. Obviously, when people say stuff, you want to be heard and you want them to hear you. But like at the end of the day, like, you should have a dialogue, whether you agree with the person or not, on most things, not everything, but on most things like this. Once it's said, it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't necessarily like what was said, but I learned something today. And if you can take something from a dialogue, whether we give it to you, whether you give it back to us, and then say, I learned something, or something like I've helped, you know, fortify a thought I had about something, then like that's all the positive we really need from that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember, we're wherever you find podcasts and occasionally on video as well on YouTube. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Fletcher Sharp.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.